Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Pinstripe Prospects Podcast, episode 9 of season number 2. We're glad that you're back with us. We're glad, hopefully, that you're staying safe, you're staying inside, and you're just kicking back and listening to a little bit of Yankees baseball prospect talk here on the podcast. I'm Ricky Keeler. We're having a great show coming up for you tonight. We have a special guest coming up in a little bit. We're going to be talking with Kiley McDaniel, formerly of Fangraphs and ESPN.com. He's going to talk about his new book, which is called Future Value, The Battle for Baseball's Soul, and how teams will find the next superstar. We'll talk about all the new changes potentially to the MLB draft and what the MLB and MLBPA decided over the past week since we've last been here. Get into a little bit of Yankees prospect talk in terms of where the system is, some of the prospects he's keeping an eye on. I think you're really going to enjoy this interview. There's so much we have to unpack with it that we're going to get into that. We'll talk about the agreement later on after the interview, and then we'll do a little Pinstripe Madness. We got the final 8 in Pinstripe Prospects Madness. And we have some really good matchups that we're going to dissect. We're going to try to give you our take on them. And, of course, you can go to our Twitter account at Pinstripe Pros over the next week. Each matchup is going to be a 2-day vote. So you will have plenty of time to go to Twitter and cast your vote. Who do you think should go to the Final Four? But there are a variety of ways you can contact us. You can tweet us at Pinstripe Pros. Like us on Facebook. Just search Pinstripe Prospects. Hit that like button. All of our stuff is there. You can go to our Instagram. Follow us there. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We're probably there. And please give us a rating. Tell us what you want to hear. Hopefully it's 5 stars. But we want to hear what guests you want to hear talk about a little bit of baseball. We want to hear the segments you want us to talk about. Anything on your mind, feel free to mention that as well. We're going to talk, of course, a couple other things in a little bit. So we'll have some fun tonight. James O'Connell's back with me. James, welcome back. How you been?
Bored, social distancing, all that not fun stuff. But I guess everyone's hanging in there, man. We're on the same boat with this pandemic stuff. So no sports to talk about really at this point. We're just kind of trying to keep everyone entertained as best we can. So long story short, I'm doing okay.
Glad to hear. One of the things I've been trying to do during this social distancing quarantine thing, I know I try to find the classic baseball games. MLB Network's done a lot of them. I'll try to find ones I've never seen before because it's so easy to find, like Game 7 2003, which I did watch, but it's legit one of the 2 games I keep on my iTunes, so I've seen it countless times. But just to hear the classic Fox music is great. I watched this past week 1986, the NLCS Astros Mets, and it was like Nolan Ryan versus Dwight Gooden. I'm like, this game is fun. And Keith Jackson was a pretty cool announcer for it. But one of the things I noticed was how did people go through the whole time without knowing what the score is after every pitch? I want to know, because that really bothered me.
I noticed that a while ago with like basketball games when you'd watch these old Knick games. When I don't know if you're a Knick fan or anyone here or anyone that listens. Your parents are always telling you, if you're 21-year-old kid like myself, or 22 now, your parents are always telling you that, like, oh wow, the Knicks back in the day, and you watch the 90s Knicks games from when they have them on the classics and stuff, and you're like, what's the score? You don't know what the score is. They don't pop up for something. They pop up periodically, so that's like a weird thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, even it was Derek Jeter's big game in 96, the opener I was watching, that game they didn't have a scoreboard. I'm like, this is crazy. Like, I guess it's just, you just knew those back then there was not much on, so you could at least see every pitch. But which by the way, I thought, like I said, Keith Jackson was pretty cool. I had never heard him really do a baseball game. I know him from college football. But just the classic pitching. I even watched, I think it was the extra innings in Game 6 of that series. Like, I try to find stuff like I know but don't know a lot of. And I kept thinking, like, back then, I was like, why'd the Mets trade? I know we bashed the Mets last week with Syndergaard, but why'd the Mets trade Mike Scott to the Astros? Like, and almost got beat by Mike Scott.
And speaking of, like, old games, well, I think Game 4 of the 2004 ALCS was on MLB Network. And I just wasn't having any of it. I even though, like, I personally do not remember 2004. I've never watched a game from 2004, like a full game. I've seen, like, clips, obviously, Ortiz's home run, Damon and whatnot, whatever went on there. But I've never sat down and watched a full game from 2004 ALCS, and that's remained the same after I saw it on television. For whatever reason, I just could not watch it. I just knew, obviously, we all know how it ended. I just could not watch something like that where it would be implemented into my brain how that happened.
It's just odd when you turn MLB Network, and a lot of the times they air the games the Yankees lost. Like I think a lot of the games this week have been like the '95 ALDS with Griffey's coming around, which I hadn't really ever seen, but that was pretty cool. Game 701 was on. I know Game 5, I think, of '04 was on the other day. So if you're looking for Yankee losses, you probably can find MLB Network. But Yankees, I'm sure, yes, there's a lot of great Yankees classics to get you through. YouTube's got a lot of games. But I try to find games like I hadn't seen where I don't really know the score, so I can get into it a little bit more. Otherwise, I just fast forward to where I go to my TV and wait till like the 8th inning happens and then I turn it on, like 2003, for example.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Just all these things that keep us busy. It's we're kind of running out of things. I'm on the YouTube watching stage of just pulling up random clips, and that I'd imagine it's going to run out pretty quickly. But I watched All American, this show on Netflix, pretty good. Recommend any sports fans out there. But other than that, there's just nothing. And hopefully, something to discuss. Any basketball fans out there, ESPN pushed up the release date to the Michael Jordan documentary. So that's going to be something for everyone to watch. I think it's April 19th for those of you basketball fans out there.
And I think also, aren't they having like a 2K tournament where like NBA players versus each other in 2K?
Yeah, I think Friday, that was supposed to be tonight, but there's some technical difficulties. I don't know anyone in the 2K community. Like Ronnie 2K, the head guy at over there 2K, he's like a community leader, called DeMarcus Cousins a POS accidentally when he didn't realize he was recording. So there's kind of a delay there, a little drama going on there.
And I think they did an MLB The Show tournament with a couple of players. I believe Amir Garrett won that one. I've been playing a lot of shows, so like it at least gets me through. But we're going to dive right now into our interview with Kiley McDaniel from ESPN. We're going to talk a lot about Yankee prospects, but a lot about the changes that are going to be made to the MLB draft this year. Of course, the NCAA ruled this past week that the players in spring sports get an extra year of eligibility, so we're going to dive into that a little bit. So if you're looking for everything about the background of amateur baseball and college baseball and want to just hear about some cool scouting points, Kiley's going to bring that to you. So without further ado, let's play our interview with Kiley McDaniel. We'll be right back to talk about it on the other side. And joining us now here on the Pinstripe Prospects podcast is a voice that you're probably familiar with if you read a lot of his work. You've read it at Fangraphs. But now you read it on ESPN.com. He's worked with different major league organizations, and we're happy to have him on the show to talk about, well, all the changes apparently to the MLB draft this year. Kiley McDaniel is here. Kiley, thanks for hopping on. How are you?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Happy to have you. So let me get your initial thoughts, because you were the first one to break the story of all the MLB draft changes, you and Jeff Passan. Your initial thoughts on all the changes that are being made. Obviously, we're in a different time, so that adds into the equation. But the possibility of now a 5-round draft and all the bonus deferrals, what do you make of all the changes that are being made?
I wouldn't say the entire sort of equation of what happened was foreseeable in detail, but in broad terms, this is how the last couple labor negotiations, this was sort of like a mini CBA, essentially. Covering the next 2 seasons with some unforeseen pandemic-like situations. And that way that it went, being sort of parallel to some past ones, is that the owners want to save money, and the players have decided where they want to make money is the big leaguers, the 40-man roster players that are part of the union, which makes some logical sense. They want to defend the people that are part of their union. And the people that are not part of their union that they're negotiating for are the amateur players, and I guess sort of the minor leaguers, but mostly the amateur players, because they control the draft and international, since both of those processes are tied to compensation for free agency. And so the way it's gone the last few times, and just sort of in general, is the owners give the big leaguers something they want, and then they get as much or even more back in return in terms of cost savings on amateur players as they enter the game. So in that sense, that's essentially how things went. Those were the priorities, the last couple CBAs. It'll be the priority for the next CBA. So in that way, it was easy to see. The difference was the playing field is obviously very different this time, given what the sort of specifics of the situation are. It's not a CBA where there's all kinds of land behind us, all kinds of land in front of us, and people are just kind of jockeying for what they want to do with all this land. Now there's way less land, and we didn't really know how that was going to play out. And then obviously we saw how things went. And I think once we got about a day in advance, it became clear what it was going to be. But until then, we didn't really know exactly how all this was going to play out.
So what do you think the main consequences are of a 5-round draft? Who do you think, if that did happen, would hurt the most?
The college juniors, especially ones that turn down money out of high school, that project to go right around 5th, 6th, 7th round or get 5th, 6th, 7th round money, that sort of $150,000 to $350,000 player, if they now don't get in the first 5 rounds, they then become $20,000 or go home. There's just not enough money left. And then if they go back to school, it sounds like they'll get to keep their eligibility and be a junior again next year, but they'll be 22. They'll be the age of a senior. And so while they will have negotiating leverage, how many of these guys that wanted to turn pro at 18 but passed the money to turn pro at 21 and then didn't get the money they wanted, and now they're wanting to turn pro at 22, they don't want to go back to school and play at age 23. So at some point, you do get your class back. You can play more college if you want. But in terms of getting into pro baseball, they're going to be treated like seniors in the same way that a lot of redshirt juniors are treated like seniors that are, essentially the age of a senior. So those players get hit the hardest. Obviously, there's a lot of high school prospects that maybe will get squeezed down around lower than normal if they're top couple round players and everyone's trying to sneak up the college guys. Or the 4th to 5th, 6th round high school kid wants to sign, would have money if there was a 40-round draft because there'd be enough money and enough picks. And now they're getting squeezed to college when maybe they didn't want to go, in which case they may end up going to junior colleges. Or if they were, set on going to a college and now it looks like they're going to redshirt and then not play for a year or two, they might end up getting kicked back to a junior college anyway. So I think the talent base in college will go up, and the amount of talent that finds its way to junior colleges will go up, because essentially pro ball is outsourcing drafting, development, and paying for all those different things to colleges. And so that's where a lot of the lower level talent will end up going there, because MLB, the owners just don't want to pay for that process.
And I think also what has to go in the equation, while yes, it gets the extra year and the roster limit does go up, that adds another dynamic to it, because how do these colleges balance out the roster sizes if, let's say, you don't get drafted, and then what's going to be the deadline for a team to say, we have to get our roster ready for the next year?
Yeah, I think college and pro baseball will both see multiple years of sort of cascading effects from this. And I don't think we can predict what all of them are. Like I imagine some colleges are going to lean toward juniors and seniors and kind of load up the roster to maybe if a coach is in hot water to get an extension, and then they'll just figure it out as they go. And I think there are some colleges that see we have a bunch of 10th to 15th round seniors. They're not going to make a difference. We have good enough freshmen and junior college players coming in that have multiple years of eligibility left that are essentially just as good as the senior, or by the end of their first year, they'll be better than the senior, that want to kind of kick the seniors out and make room for the new guys and sort of lean toward youth. And then you're also going to see a number of players, either very young or very old, that'll get squeezed off of rosters. And it looks like that there will be a vote, I believe, in April about having a one-time, no penalty transfer rule. So then at that point, if there's all kinds of roster reconstruction and shuffling, and everybody can change schools once without a penalty and just go play there the next year, and you also have junior colleges, and there's also the threat of the MPB. It was with Carter Stewart last year. There's also some guys could go indie ball, like has been an option in the past. There's just all kinds of different options now, when it used to sort of be pro ball. And if either you're super rich, really want to go to college, or you're not good enough, you go to college. And now there's a lot of different dynamics happening and fewer spots for pro ball. And so all the different sort of amateur and secondary pro markets become more appealing.
Kiley, one of the bigger topics in baseball with this coronavirus pandemic is how minor league players are going to be compensated during this time off. What have you heard about how that's going to happen? And have you spoke to any players and with their concerns, et cetera?
Not about that specifically. I know Jeff had a report today that they will get paid, and essentially this is a version of what had been discussed, and I think could, depending on if there's games played or not, be what happens with big leaguers, which is they just sort of cut the difference between for minor leaguers between the 6-year free agents making pretty decent money, and then the first 6 year of minor league service guys who are making below poverty level, and
Right.
paying them sort of in between those two levels. So I think they're basically just matching the entire pool of pay for all minor leaguers, which is 90% guys making almost nothing, and just paying that to everyone. So the guys on that 0 to 6 are making a little more than they were expecting. And the guy that would be making maybe $100K playing 5 months in the minor leagues is now way back down to the poverty level. And so that small group of guys in AAA, essentially, they're really getting screwed. But I guess, they're getting paid and they might not play any games this year. So that's better than nothing, I suppose. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of cascading effects, both in college and minor league baseball as a result of this. And I don't think we can see all of it, but I think there's also going to be a bit of a dovetailing around how many rounds the draft will be and how many short season league teams there will be. And I think the sort of, going back to what I was saying before about what the sort of long-term goals and strategy are in these CBA or CBA-like negotiations is the owners want to cut costs and they want to basically only pay to draft, sign, and develop the most elite lower level talent and then all of the upper level talent. And so that probably means these players that are on the fringes of the minor leagues, either at the upper or lower levels, that aren't getting paid that much, they're just going to get cut. And so while minor league pay, I think, is an important issue that needs to be solved, I think one way that a lot of it is going to get solved is a higher percentage of guys that are in the minors will be 7-figure or high 6-figure bonus guys, so they won't be hurting quite as much. And there's just not going to be that many signs for $1,000 and hangs around the minors for 6 years guys, because that's already not a very big percentage. And now if you're doing 5 or 10 or 20 round drafts and fewer short season leagues, those guys just don't get signed in the first place. They go to indie ball and make no money there, and that's not the owner's problem anymore.
So kind of looking at it from a Yankees perspective, I think I won't say pro and con, but less negative than the other. And I think the first thing I want to mention is potentially if it's 10 rounds, the Yankees are only going to have 8 picks because of the Garrett Cole signing. If it's 5, they're only going to have 3. How big of a concern you think that is for Brian Cashman, David Oppenheimer, and his staff to potentially only have 3 picks in a year where, well, there's not going to be teams with many picks. I think the Marlins have a lot of picks if it is 5 rounds, but to only have 3 picks in a given draft for one team has to be a big concern for the Yankees.
Yeah, it's tricky, and I remember, I want to say a couple of years ago, there was a team that had not very many picks, and I don't remember if it was an article or if I went through it by hand, looking at all the teams that were sort of very short on picks. So I guess in your example, like sort of missing 2 high picks and having no extra ones, so 3 picks in 5 rounds would be essentially what I'm talking about. The track record of those draft classes, so like that team working from behind, they almost never have a good result, which is kind of interesting because it's not like, after the 10th round where nobody has any extra picks and, every pick is essentially the same at that point. Being at the top or bottom of a round doesn't mean very much. The teams that don't have picks in like the top 5 rounds don't really do that well in the later rounds either. There's not like a huge track record of teams that are shorthanded one year and they, nail 3 big leaguers in rounds 10 through 25. Just doesn't really work out that way. And I don't know if that's because they, use their resources differently, because there's, less money sort of being invested on amateur players. And not to plug the book, but the book Eric and I just wrote, we sort of pinpoint teams that we think are doing the best job. Like, no one's obviously doing a perfect job, but the teams that are doing the best job in terms of balancing both sort of analytics and scouting in terms of, scouting, but also like in player development, they sort of have some of the old school methods and some of the new school methods and are able to sort of squeeze the most out of whatever situation they're in, depending on, what needs to be squeezed. And the Yankees are one of the 3 sort of example organizations we use along with the Dodgers and the Rays. All that to say, the track record of teams with a shorthanded amount of picks doing well, not very strong. But if there was a team that I think could, figure out how to make this work for themselves, the Yankees would obviously be one of the 3 teams we would pick.
And I think that's the standpoint of sorry, James, go ahead.
That's all right, you got it. Go ahead.
I would say with the Yankees also, the aspect of it that's a little less negative than having the 3 picks is I think just the fact of, well, again, who knows if we're going to have a minor league season, it's a whole different thing entirety, but to have the Dominican Summer League, to have the 2 Gulf Coast League, the Pulaski team in Appalachian League and Staten Island, at least they have more lower level talent areas than a lot of other teams do to kind of maybe withstand this in a way.
Yeah, I mean, obviously being a former Braves employee and living in Atlanta, I get asked about Braves stuff a lot. And their whole issue was obviously with the international sanctions, they don't have a lot of like rookie ball, DSL, short season talent. And then this past draft, they focused on saving money with their top picks and then getting a bunch of high school mid six figure bonus guys later to sort of fill out, because they would have, a whole roster with one real prospect. And then there's teams like, the Padres or the Yankees or the Rays that have very deep systems that'll have like a 25-man roster in the GCL and have like 17 actual like prospects with a chance to make the big leagues on the team. So yeah, in that respect, one of the teams that came up the most when there's all the talk about cutting minor league teams, it's like, well, the Yankees, if you go, a couple extra short season teams in the States and then an extra one in DSL, I'm not sure if they still do. I know they did at one point. That's like a lot of extra roster spots. Like obviously like almost 100 extra players. And I get the impression that in most cases they are sort of pushing the limits of those rosters and having as many guys as they can on there. And there are other teams that have no extra teams and aren't always pushing the limits of those rosters. And like I said, it's like over 100 players difference between them. And so obviously if you have good player development and good scouting and 100 and something extra roster spots, you're just going to have more prospects in general. And so a year when you're not going to add that many prospects to the system, you're still going to, be have pretty good density in terms of prospect value at each roster. Then the question will be a couple of years from now, if you are forced to reduce the amount of roster spots you have because you have to get rid of minor league teams, then you have like a whole nother problem to solve where you want to, similar to a 40-man crunch, you kind of want to get rid of the guys that are prospects that you won't have room for before you have to just cut them and other teams get them for free, which is a whole different issue that may never actually happen, but it seems like we're headed in that direction.
Yeah, to chime in there real quick, I was actually just looking at the organizational roster as a whole, and including guys on the 40-man, the Yankees have 377 players under contract. I think that's got to be the most out of any other team in baseball.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, I don't know how many other teams like have all the extra like sort of roster spots the Yankees have, and during the season you can always kind of hide guys in DL spots and things like that, but in the offseason you don't have those, and so yeah, they're like kind of, there may be another team close to them, but I'm not even sure that there is.
So I think also, Kyler, when you take a look at this from Yankee perspective, I'm from Staten Island. Of course, I cover the Staten Island Yankees, and all the talk of this past few months has been about minor league contraction. What kind of effects do you think this shortened draft could have on maybe those efforts being accelerated?
Yeah, I mean, it's at this point, obviously with Bernie Sanders mentioning it, it became a bit of a political issue where it's obviously, I think, amongst baseball fans, a PR issue in terms of getting rid of these teams because you're sort of taking baseball away from smaller towns. And I would like to think the owners would look at that as a marketing issue, a marketing expense, because a lot of these teams lose money and are also, all the players are subsidized, they're paid for by the team. And so if you look at it just, like as a cold economic issue from an owner's perspective, he's like, I'm paying hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe $1 million a year for these players, like paying their salaries. And then these people put on a game and they're still losing money when they're not really paying for anything. Why should I be supporting this? And from that perspective, it makes total sense. Like, it's not a good business proposition. Most of these teams have been brought up. A lot of them lose money, or they're owned by the organization. And so, they're actually running like the day-to-day operations of, essentially Eric and I in the book describe it as a theme park that has baseball there. Like they're just sort of selling, selling food like you're at Disney World. There just happens to be a baseball game. And so from that perspective, like, they're bad business. But that's not the only reason they exist. Like, it also helps market your sport, and people that, live far away from a big league stadium, or maybe wouldn't be able to afford to go to a big league game. This is their way to interact with the game, or kids that one day are going to choose what sport they want to play. Obviously baseball already has some marks against it in terms of not being the sexiest or most popular sport. It also doesn't have as many college scholarships as the other sports. And now it'll be harder to watch it as other sports are more popular on TV and social media, and you can't go to a game. And so it's just sort of like cutting off your nose to spite your face, because I think if it was looked at as a marketing cost, like if they were, building another field in Compton to say we're reaching out to the inner city, I don't think any of the owners would really care about that expense. But when it's tied to like operations and it seems like they're being smart by cutting costs, like it then becomes much more feasible. But all that to say, I guess, sort of answering your question, I think the sort of 5-round draft, fewer players coming into the minors, a shorter minor league season, if there is one, and even a short season minor league season, I think that's all going to speed up the issue where it had become a little bit contentious. I don't think it was clear how it was going to go. It was eventually going to get these teams cut. And now I think if an owner says I need to cut some money and we're going to do it like this, I don't think people are going to put up much of a fight because everyone is seeing how much they're getting affected economically. And it's pretty easy to see a lot of these teams, especially the ones that are being mentioned for the chopping block, are just kind of bad business and everybody's, down some money. So while a billionaire isn't necessarily the most sympathetic figure, they did lose a bunch of money, and this is an easy way to get it back.
So, Kylie, kind of switching gears to the Yankee system as a whole, one of the bigger topics of conversation was the amount of talented arms the Yankees have in their system. Who has your attention in the Yankee system pertaining to pitching, and why?
That's a good question. I feel like at this time last year, and then like the end of the season, and then after I made all my calls to do the list, I feel like I had a different group of names. David Garcia, obviously, is probably like the most well-known name, and he was probably near the top, if not the top of that list, at all three junctures. Clark Schmidt was somebody who was definitely not on the radar at this point last year because obviously he hadn't pitched very much, if at all, after Tommy John, and then was pretty good last year and was really good in spring training this year. And with the pitching injuries, it seemed like he had pitched himself into position to possibly be in the big league rotation at some point if there was, a lengthy need for somebody that doesn't sort of break with the team. And I guess there was a non-zero chance he could, be up pretty quickly. Moving down, I guess, a little bit from there, Miguel Yajure was another guy that was sort of on the radar as like, keep an eye on this guy, and took a huge step forward and now kind of has that, mid to back rotation type look. I think the sort of most interesting guy, just because of the pure upside and stuff, is Luis Medina, who I'm sure you guys are aware had that run toward the end of the year where we started throwing strikes. And I feel like everybody in the organization and everybody scouting the organization was basically just waiting for him to show flashes of just throwing the ball, not even like good strikes, but just in the strike zone and like executing at like an acceptable rate. And once he did it, I think everybody got so excited that it's sort of easy to jump on board, but it was just a handful of starts. So you'd like to see more. And then I would just say, I guess, the last guy that I would be sort of excited to see that hasn't really done much in pro ball yet would be Osiel Rodriguez, who was one of the better sort of, international 16-year-old amateur pitchers I had seen in the appearance he had at the MLB showcase before he signed. And basically just like a young guy that has always performed, is a gamer, good body, good delivery, the projection, all that sort of stuff, throws strikes, will flash you 3+. And there's just not a lot of 16-year-olds that both show you like the projection and starter traits and the command and the performance, and then also show you the stuff. And it's sort of now stuff. It's not like every now and then he throws one good pitch. But he had some, very soreness and got shut down. They were very cautious with him. So he hasn't really been let loose yet, but I think he might have the most upside in the system in terms of arms.
So, Kylie, one thing we do each week on the podcast, we take a look at a different minor league position in the Yankee system. And this week, our listeners voted on center field. Is there one or two center field prospects you think that fans should keep an eye on once there is a season, if there is a season?
I think the two most exciting guys in the system, I probably don't have to tell you guys very much about Jason Dominguez, would be him and Kevin Alcantara, who are both, teenagers at the lowest levels. I guess Dominguez hasn't played yet, so not even really at a level yet. Dominguez, I think, if you're not one of those people that have like tracked down all the various videos of him on the internet, is basically just Yasiel Puig, but he's 16, and so the idea would be, maybe he never improves and he's just like a pretty good big leaguer like Puig is, or since he's 16, there's like somewhat of a linear improvement to where, I guess that leads to Mike Trout at some point if you're like already a pretty good big leaguer in terms of, tools at that age. So that just sort of allows you to imagine whatever you want to imagine. Alcantara is interesting because typically when you hear about a 6'4" hitter of any type, you just assume it's either sort of the big fat first baseman that can't do anything else that's 6'4", 250, or you think the sort of like baby giraffe type guy that like, doesn't really know how to, it's just sort of a disaster in terms of coordinating his limbs. And also either one of those guys typically has issues sort of keeping their limbs in check in a way, like getting around on an inside fastball, like hitting for average will always be an issue, that kind of thing. And Alcantara is like such a sort of supreme athlete in this, sort of Christian Pache, like if he grew up in America, he'd probably be a wide receiver in the SEC kind of way. But also in terms of clearing his hands inside, getting around on inside stuff, and just sort of baseball athleticism in terms of like, strength from his, fingertips to his forearms, having like sort of now power in games, being a long strider with feel for playing center field. Like he just sort of does all of that stuff so early. I actually wrote something for the website where we were talking about the best prospects we had seen, and I talked about the best amateur defensive play I'd seen, which was Lewis Brinson when he was in high school. And to give context, Lewis Brinson was on a team where he was the only Division I talent on the high school team. He was a first-round pick, is in the big leagues with the Marlins now. He was the only Division I player on his team, and he was the third best hitter on his team. Like, it was sort of laughable for how good of a prospect he was, how bad he was currently at hitting. Alcantara has very similar upside to Brinson, and this guy is 16, even younger than Brinson was at that age, and he was like one of the best players at his level. And when scouts were going on the DSL to watch that team, they were like picking him out of everybody. And you would think that would be a guy to be a little more of a late blooming type. Estevan Florial, another center fielder. Obviously, he's gotten into sort of the prospect fatigue area, but I'm keeping my eye on him. I think all the tools could translate into health and performance at any point, so I wouldn't sleep on him. And then a couple other, like, I guess on the younger Latin end of things, Antonio Cabello also had a tough season, some injuries, some inconsistencies. I think he is primed for a breakout. Everson Pereira, another guy that's both tools and performance at a young age, and I think got into some trying to add loft to his swing issues last year that I think he may work his way out of, maybe already has. Yeah, I would say those are probably like the top tier guys, unless you want to get into the really deep sleepers.
We also want to mention that you're here on behalf of, like you mentioned, the book that you wrote with Eric Longenhagen, Future Value: The Battle for Baseball Soul and How Teams Will Find the Next Superstar. That's going to be coming out in April. What do you want the listeners to know about the book, and what do you think they'll learn the most from it?
So the sort of genesis of it was I kind of first got into baseball right when the book Moneyball came out. I was a senior in high school at that point, which is when I was trying to figure out internships and college majors and all that kind of thing. And I wasn't involved in the industry at this point, obviously, but from talking to people when that came out, scouts were scared that they were going to get replaced by analysts and sort of statistics in general. And the opposite happened. It turned out once teams, read all that stuff and kind of saw where they were behind, they realized that, especially in amateur baseball and at the low end of the minor leagues, scouting reports were still the most predictive number they had. And so most teams like staffed up, even the teams that were the most progressive were still staffing up and adding scouts. Now in the last 5 years or so with TrackMan, StatCast, Hawkeye, bat sensors, Rapsodo, all these different sorts of technology, all the different things that scouts were seeing that they couldn't find in on base percentage or, whatever sort of basic numbers they were using back in the Moneyball days, they now can see those things. And in addition to that, things that scouts can't see, like rise on a four-seam fastball and spin rates and things that, you could kind of see glimpses of, but you could never really quantify in a way to explain why a guy is good. Now they can explain that stuff better than a scout can in some ways. So if you're a team that is inclined to want to go down that road of we're going to eliminate scouts, we're going to do a lot of remote scouting, video scouting, etc., because we think that stuff's smarter than the scout is and we want to save money, you have the information to defend that decision, whereas you didn't in the past. Not saying that that's the correct answer, but you can defend that if you want. So that was sort of the stage that the book was sort of conceived upon, to take a deep dive on both the scouting end of things, the statistical end of things, a couple other spots in terms of if you're a player, how to get recruited and pick your college and get into pro ball and train. If you want to work in a front office or be a scout, how to get those jobs, what they entail. All those sorts of things. And so we sort of generally broke the book down into 3 sections, which would be how to scout, just from soup to nuts. There's almost 100 pages. There's a web page that'll go up soon for when the book comes out, showing videos that go with the words in the book. And so if you want to be a scout, this will be a good start. If you just want to sort of know more from your couch, this is, as far as I know, the only resource that really tries to do this in an in-depth way. The second part is about July 2, the international signing period, and the draft. There's 3 chapters on those 2, and it's basically goes back and forth between sort of strategy, how things work, stories, and stories from obviously scouting directors, people that work for teams, and then also stories from those people about how they signed, Wander Franco, Jason Dominguez, Vlad Jr., all the way back to Harold Reynolds is mentioned. There's all kinds of stories. I mentioned when I was with the Braves and I first scouted Wander Franco when he was 14, and how we didn't know who he was, and then kind of all that sort of stuff. So that's sort of section 2. And then section 3 is about statistics and just sort of like starting all the way back at the Branch Rickey stuff to the Moneyball stuff, and then now to all of the sort of very advanced stuff. And we sort of in-depth explain these are the numbers that Houston has that tell them why they don't need as many scouts. This is the pluses and minuses of that approach. This is where we think the answer is. And we just sort of realized, I guess, that we're such an inflection point in baseball in terms of the evaluation and the behind the scenes stuff of how things are going. That's sort of a comprehensive look from sort of every side of the behind the scenes seemed like it was in order. And once we got into it, the publisher actually told us that we had written too many words. So apparently the book was going to be too thick, and we had to like cut down a little bit. So a couple stories that maybe should have been in there got cut. And so if maybe there's another book or a paperback version or something, we'll get there. But yeah, the way we described it was we thought the audience at the beginning would be anyone that's in the hotel at the winter meetings, either trying to get a job or working in baseball or, works for a minor league team or whatever it is, they would all read it. And now we've kind of worked our way down to like, if you're just like casually follow baseball and your neighbor's, potential D1 prospect, there's like 2 or 3 chapters that are like about like how you will interact with all of that stuff and stuff that will like matter to you. And if you're not like a diehard fan or you want to hear the story about how, Vlad Jr. was signed. So we think there's like a pretty wide audience of people that can be affected by this. And I think a lot of the topics we hit on are just things that aren't written about at this length or in this depth, or even, really in book format. So I would encourage you guys to look into it.
So where can they get the book? And I understand that there, I think Triumph Books, which is the publisher, is having a promo, I believe, to help with the book as well.
Yeah, we had a discount code, which was FB20, that got 20% off the book and undercuts the Amazon price. And the book also got delivered, I think, like 2 or 3 weeks before it was supposed to be released. So that was like an added benefit. Some people, I've actually gotten a text from a scout today who said he's already read the entire book. And Eric got a text from a GM that said he read the entire book. So I guess people just don't have a lot going on right now. But if you're, Amazon person, like I get it, everything shows up a day later. That's fantastic. Or if you support your local bookstore, do it the way you want to. Right now, there is another sale at triumphbooks.com. It's actually 35% off. So it's now $10 under the Amazon price. And also, if you're inclined to maybe do what would help Eric and I the most, we actually get the biggest cut royalty wise if you get it from there. So if you really want to get it somewhere else, I'm not going to stop you. If you want to help us the most and get the best price, then go to triumphbooks.com and use FE20 to get 20% off. And I believe it's No Sports 35 is the discount code they're running right now, which I've tweeted about in the last couple of days. And I think it's just sitting on the website too.
Last question for you from me. You recently did a couple weeks ago on ESPN.com, the organizational rankings and how you viewed everything. And I won't give it away because I want people to go ESPN and read it. You had the Yankees, I feel, higher than a lot of people in the industry do. Why do you have the Yankees
ranked them? We can give that part away.
All right, you had the Yankees at number 5, which I think is a lot higher than a lot of other publications have them right now. A lot of people have them like middle of the pack or so. Why do you believe in the system so high, where I feel a lot of their talent is in the lower level variety than the upper level right now?
Yeah, it's. I expect to. All right, let's see. How do I want to say this? So at this point last year, the Yankee system, when Eric and I wrote it up for Fangraphs, it had, I think it was over 50% teenagers, which no other team was over, I think like 27%. It was like literally double what any other team had in terms of teenagers. And we already knew, just given like how good the team was at signing international players and developing them, it was already a higher variant system and was probably going to be ranked lower because there were so many guys that could take a step forward and be sort of top 100 or top 150 type guys. We could just like eyeball these guys, 12, 15 guys and be like, hey, if that guy has a good season, he might be all the way up there. There was just so many different ways for it to improve. But we have found in the research that Craig Edwards did at Fangraphs, which we use there, and I've used in some of the stuff I've done at ESPN, the value of a farm system is like overwhelmingly defined. Like it's, 70, 80% top 100 prospects. And at this point last year, I think Davey Garcia was the only guy we had in the top 100. And so only having one basically means you have to be, even if you have the most players on your list, if you have 70 guys on there, if only one of them's in the top 100, you basically have to be in the bottom 10 out of all 30 organizations. And what happened this year is obviously they added Jason Dominguez, who was just a top 100 player that just, came out of thin air. And Davey Garcia sort of held his spot, didn't graduate. And then I'm actually if I were to look at the Fangraphs list, he had a couple guys on there that I didn't. We had slight differences. I mentioned that one because I helped contribute to that one before I left, and then wrote my own at ESPN. But I had 4 guys in the top 100. So going from essentially just added 3, and then there was another guy, Kevin Alcantara, who I said was a 50 that isn't in the top 100. So he's in that 101 to 120 area, which is still very useful. And then there were another 6 or 8 guys who were not coming into the year in that sort of 150 to 200 range that got up there. So it was every different tier got populated with more players. And what really defines it is, like I said, those top 100 goes from 1 to 4, maybe 5, call it 4.5. That means when you have 4, that already puts you in the top, whatever it is, 10 or 12 teams in terms of that. And with Dominguez and Garcia both in the top 50, I think just those guys, I think automatically just alone, if that's your whole system is just those 4 or 5 guys, that puts you in the middle of the pack right there. And then obviously all the different, different examples of depth and things like that, the second, third tier guys continued moving them up. And I didn't realize they were going to be 5th until I was actually gaming the whole thing out. And I made this big grid of how many players were at each tier and sort of did the math behind using all of Craig Weber's work. And I would have guessed they would have been about 10th or so, probably at the high end of what everybody has them at. And then because it's so deep and there is now that sort of newly formed higher group, once I sort of looked at it, I was like, oh yeah, this is both a bulk play with lots of higher upside guys and a longer list, but then also they have the upper end guys. And I was like, okay, yeah, now that I'm looking at it, it makes some sense. And so I would think, because I think it was probably consensus coming into last year that they were bottom 10, just because, again, there weren't those top 100 guys. If there's not a bunch of dramatic changes or a bunch of, number 1 overall picks or trades or things like that, it seems extreme to move them from whatever it was we had them last year, from 24th to 5th, roughly speaking. That seems like a lot. I wouldn't have guessed that would have happened. But that's sort of what the numbers bear out. And I feel much better about that being an objective process where I just go about my work and rate everybody and then line them all up and see what the math tells me, which is what happened, rather than sort of, eyeball it and try to use my feelings and create a narrative out of it, because I think that's how people get in trouble.
Kiley, once again, thanks for joining us on the show. Remember, you could check out the book, Future Value, The Battle for Baseball's Soul, and How the Teams Will Find the Next Superstar. I'm looking forward to checking out the book because I want to take a look at their perspective. So definitely check that out. Kiley, how can they follow you on Twitter?
I'm on Twitter at KileyMCD, and I'm on Instagram at Kiley McDaniel. And one extra thing I would add, I think, especially for your audience,
yeah, of course.
There are, I would say, about a half dozen scouts that become sort of main characters in the book that tell multiple stories and sort of really dive into their process. And Donnie Roland from the Yankees, the international scouting director, is one of them. And part of the reason that happened is because he used to run the Angels domestic scouting. He was their scouting director back in the day. And on his staff, I think of the 10 scouts we talked to, 5 of them were on his staff one year. And so all of their stories were mentioning each other. And so their process of drafting, Howie Kendrick involves a lot of the same people, at least one of the same people that, signing Jason Dominguez or, Luis Medina or whoever else it is. And you get to hear a lot of sort of the process of Yankee specific stuff. So if after my whole spiel, you thought I was a bit long winded and, lost the thread there of what I was saying, and you're like, I don't know, I'm a big Yankees fan. That's it. I'm not going to work for a front office. What do I care? There's a ton of Yankee stuff in there, and almost all of it is stuff that has not been reported before. And I think if you just want to know more about the Yankee system, there's a level that if I was a Yankees fan, I would be excited to learn about, because I think they do a really good job. And I think you get a pretty good idea of how that stuff works.
And you can, even if, like you said, you could use it while you're watching from home, while you're watching all these classic games on TV. And I have a tough time doing it because I'm just one who remembers teams to score of everything. I find though, I'm trying to watch these games differently to see if I pick something up that I didn't a long time ago, or if a game I hadn't seen, maybe I watch it differently and think, if only the manager knew the things we had now.
Yeah, it would be amazing if there was a team back in the 70s that was doing a bunch of launch angle and high spin rate curveballs and shifting on everybody and not stealing any bases. I'm sure they would all get laughed. I still remember talking to my dad when I was explaining to him how, when I read Moneyball, that hey, Wade Boggs is better than you thought because he drew a bunch of walks. And he was like, that guy seems so lazy. He didn't want to hit. He didn't want to run. He wasn't a fast runner. He wasn't that great at defense. He just walked all the time and hit a bunch of singles. And I was like, it turns out that's actually very valuable in a way that no one at the time was really aware of.
Kiley, once again, thanks for joining us. Good luck with the book. Keep up the great work at ESPN, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks for the time.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
And our special thanks again to Kiley McDaniel from ESPN.com for hopping on the show. Again, be sure to pick up Future Value, the battle for baseball soul, and how teams will find the next superstar. And James, there's just so much in that interview. I think if you're looking for any prospect knowledge, Kiley's the guy you got to go to. He laid out a lot in the, I think, almost like 40 minutes we did there.
Yeah, kind of interesting to dive into all the kind of what ifs with the MLB draft, with the shortened draft, which teams will have a certain amount of picks. The Yankees, you said, will only have like 3 picks within 5 rounds. Kind of interesting diving into that because not enough people really are talking about it or quite frankly really care about it because the MLB draft is not the most significant draft of the 4 major sports. So and it's always interesting to kind of hear that side, especially from a guy of Kiley's stature.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing you want to look at here, if you want another reason to be mad at the Astros, if there is a 5-round draft and you're a Yankees fan, your team has fewer picks than the Houston Astros, who would still lose their first-round pick, but would have 4 picks, and the Yankees would have 3. But Garrett Cole's worth 2 picks, but still.
No, agreed. But I mean, I want you kind of forget about the whole Astros thing, everything going on, but that's just like a friendly reminder of what they did. I like. Have you really thought about this whole Astros scandal while this is going on? I think this has kind of helped push it aside in a sense. You know, it's definitely weird to really think about where we were like just a month ago with all the havoc that was going on.
I honestly think the last time I thought about it was when I listened to Rob Manfred on with Scott Van Pelt on SportsCenter last week, and Scott asked him about the Red Sox investigation, and Manfred said it's done. I just have to write it up, and then that's when I think that came back to my mind a little bit.
That's interesting because even that I kind of forgot about. Right, like the Red Sox are still being technically invested. There's still an investigation to be had with the Boston Red Sox. So. Well, who knows what that's going to bring? Does it really matter at this point? The kind of society has been shut down, so it's weird not having sports as your number one thought of the day. The first thing you switch on when you go on TV because we've really essentially been removed from the sports world in a sense. Like people always say like, man, like how do people live without sports? Like how do people who do not like sports? Like, what do they do with their lives? Well, this is it, guys. They watch a bunch of TV and they talk about a bunch of nonsense. So this is it.
But I think this is a significant draft for the Yankees when it happens in July because if they only have 3 picks, they really need to click on them. They do have a lot of international talent, and Kiley gotten a couple guys, especially that we've talked about on the podcast, like Jason Dominguez, Kevin Alcantara, who I've talked about. I'm a huge fan of. Everson Pereira, who I got to see in Staten Island last year, but got hurt early on in the season, so that kind of messed up his year, but he showed good skills when he was on the field. But when you only have a 3-round draft potentially, even if you have 10 rounds, it's still only 8 picks you get. You can't really afford to miss on those.
Yeah, well, if one thing that we know, and Rob brought it up in the interview, is that the Yankees' strength of their system is at the lower levels, or at least that's what we think. We think they have a very deep system kind of in the lower levels. So you have a lot of young talent. And Kiley said in the interview, if there's one team that could kind of find a way around it, kind of figure it out, it's probably the Yankees. So I wouldn't be all that concerned about the draft having just 3 picks, which seems completely ridiculous with 3 picks with how long the MLB draft usually is, but I wouldn't be all that concerned about the Yankee system as a whole because at the end of the day, everyone's taking a hit from this thing. Mm-hmm. One way or another, you're going to be hurt somehow, and that's not just limited to the Yankees. That's all the other 29 teams in baseball.
Oh, of course. But I think also the international signing period could get pushed back, it sounds like, so that also hurts things in a way. But you're right, it hurts every team pretty much the same way. But I think also looking at it from all baseball side, it's kind of like what we're seeing with the football, where like they can't really FaceTime. They can FaceTime, but they can't have the in-person interviews with the players and things like that. But the Yankee scouts have at least seen some of the college players. They played part of a season, so they kind of have enough information. We'll see if they're even able to have like combines or something like that. I doubt it, but who knows? So at least they'll have at least the basics of watching them from past months to kind of get an idea of who they want to pick at the bottom of the first round or in rounds 3 and 4 for them.
Yeah, this is going to have a big impact one way or another on everyone, and my faith does lie with the Yankees here, or even baseball in general. This is something everyone's going to get past, and the draft. They're gonna have to figure that out, man. Like what like you said, with like the scouting, kind of just go off what they had in the past, because there's no spring sports for these high school seniors that are gonna get drafted. So everyone's in a very different spot than really they're accustomed to.
The other thing I think that hit home to me today was seeing the news that Toronto wasn't going to have public events until June 30th.
Oh my God, that scared the living life out of me, because I thought that meant. Thank God someone clarified that, because I thought that meant no baseball until minimum July, and I know it seems like that's where we're heading, but I don't want to see that now. Like, at least hold it off a little bit, making that a decision. Thank God someone clarified that it's just kind of like I guess permit events. I don't know, but it had nothing to do with sports. That thankfully.
But I think at the same time, are we getting to a point? I'm wondering, especially now with all these different states joining New York and New Jersey and what's going on. Are we just going to get to a point where if there is a season at all, most of these games are going to be played with no fans?
I don't know. I don't know if they'll do that. I really, because it's such a weird thing. I think I'm not 100% sure that we're going to have a season this year, just from the way that everyone's been talking, just how bad it is. The president today, so we might have around 250,000 deaths. But if it's true what all these doctors and everyone that was on that task force today talking to the press, this and that at the end of 2 or 3 weeks, there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully that comes about, that there is going to be light at the end of the tunnel. We can get back to normal relatively soon. But is it realistic to think that you can get an 140 game season in this year? No, I don't. I don't even know if they're going to be able to get a 100-game season, and it's a weird spot to be in. But I'll give baseball until around the middle of May, kind of I'm going to play a waiting game a little bit before I fully make up my mind about where this is going. If there's no baseball in sight by like the middle of May, then this season might just be a wash, complete wash, because by the time you get things organized and you're mid-June, July, it's something that might not work. Will baseball sign up for a half a season? I don't know. But that new CBA they signed, hopefully there's some plans in there that kind of map out where they'll go if we have to resume the season, where the All-Star break would be, and just play a half a season that way. I don't know. I don't know what the thinking is of Rob Manfred and everyone involved. But this is, again, scary times, because this is something that no one's ever experienced. You don't just cancel baseball unless it was like for World War II back in the day. But this is like a scary, scary movie. It really is.
And it's tough for any of these commissioners. I think there's no wrong decision, because you don't know what numbers they have at their disposal, what information they're looking at. So whatever decision they make, it's really tough to criticize them for. You're just really waiting to see what happens, and I think everybody is.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. You can't harp on these guys, because there's not one person on this earth that would know the correct thing to do. Like, there's no obvious answer. Well, the obvious answer is to kind of shut it down for now. I feel like that's kind of out of question. Like, we know that this has to be shut down. But as far as bringing it back and how they're going to bring it back, is there going to be a spring training period? Is there going to be double headers played? I don't know. So Rob Manfred, you're going to get a pass from everyone right now, even Adam Silver and Roger Goodell and all the commissioners of all these leagues. They have a pass, because this is new. This is something nobody has ever experienced, so you can't really harp on these guys.
Oh, I just ask if we're going to do double headers, which I think isn't a bad thing if that's the case. I heard it. This is why I watch ESPN. please don't talk about base. I thought it was a get up. I think I saw. Don't ever talk about baseball games ending in a tie. I never want to see
Who
that.
said that?
That would. I think it was on like Mike Greenberg was talking about it on Get Up. I'm like, please, no ties.
Okay.
That would be the thing to get me away from the sport. I think if they ever had.
That's not going to happen. They're not. Rob Manfred is many things, but as far as changing the complete integrity of the game, where there's always a winner and loser, no matter how long it gets, and there's no clock, the beauty of baseball cannot be taken. It won't be taken. So that's just completely ridiculous. Whoever proposed ties in baseball.
Over at Pinstripe Prospects, we're now providing exclusive minor league content to our paid subscribers with our Dugout membership programs. You get scouting reports, player interviews, features, and much more in addition to our free Major League coverage. You can sign up today for our Dugout membership programs, either $7 a month, $63 a year, and you get a chance to win some giveaways that we do throughout the year. But we just did a thing now where when you sign up and you use the promo code IMissBaseball, again, the promo code is IMissBaseball, and don't we all, you get your first 30 days free. So we even add that on for you. So there's many perks, as I mentioned, to being in the Dugout membership program. So please sign up today. We really do appreciate it. So let's get into Pinstripe Prospect Madness, and we are in the Elite Eight. I'm going to go through the voting totals for our second round matchups as each region has their final, which we'll dive into. We'll start in the Cashman region. Gleyber Torres, the top seed, advanced very comfortably over Austin Romine, 97% to 3%. He'll face Luis Severino, who beat Jabba Chamberlain. Severino got 71% of the vote there. In the Oppenheimer region, Aaron Judge advanced very comfortably over James Kaprielian, 94% of the vote for Judge. And he takes on the upset 6th seed. Jason Dominguez advanced again, beating Tyler Austin 68 to 32. In the Afterman region, Gary Sanchez beat Esteban Florial 86 to 14. He'll face Miguel Andujar. Andujar beat Phil Hughes 68 to 32. And finally, in the Robin region, the first 1 seed went down. Clint Frazier with a dominant upset, 74-26 for Jesus Montero. So Frazier will face Dylan Betances, who beat Slade Heathcott 92 to 8. So James, a lot of 90% and high 80s, but a couple upsets as we get into the regional finals here.
Yeah, but I think overall the thing to take from here, this is Aaron Judge's tournament to lose. I mean, I don't unless Twitter gets in the way of voting in freaking Jason Dominguez, who hasn't played a game yet in the Yankee uniform. This is Judge's thing to lose. The most intriguing matchup I think left of this Elite Eight, it's got to be Gleyber versus Sevy. No, I mean those are that's gonna be a really tight matchup. I would go Gleyber only because A, he was the number 1 prospect in baseball at one point. B, he's panned out to be probably the best of the bunch, other than maybe Judge. He might be the best player in the Yankees coming up. That might be a hot take, but if there's one guy that I kind of want up at the plate at any given moment, it's probably Gleyber at this point, or DJ. Whatever. He's the best homegrown. Is he technically homegrown, Ricky? Have you thought about that? Is Gleyber homegrown in your mind?
No, because if you got him from the Cubs and he joined the Yankees when he came to the Yankees, he went right to high A. I don't consider Gleyber Torres a homegrown player.
See, that's an interesting conversation because I think Yankee fans, or at least the traditional Yankee fan, values that homegrown factor. So would that play into Severino being a homegrown Yankee versus Gleyber not being homegrown Yankee? I don't know, but I think that's the most intriguing matchup left there.
Yeah, that to me, out of the 4, I think this is probably my favorite one. This is where I think Gleyber Torres advanced very comfortably in his first 2 matchups. If he advances here, it's not going to be very – I can see like a 60-40, 65-35 at the most. I could see this one – remember, we're doing 2-day voting for these matchups. I think this is going to be very come down to the wire, like your March Madness last couple minutes here.
Yeah. The other kind of thing that's interesting to me is Gary versus Andujar. Well, Gary Sanchez versus Miguel Andujar.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see that going? I'm just curious because I don't have an answer.
That is a tough one because while both guys are known for their offense, both guys are not known for their defense.
No.
So this one could go either way too. I think I would go with Gary Sanchez, but I could understand anybody that want to go with Andujar here.
Just because of the underperformance of Gary Sanchez at the plate, which is supposed to be a strong suit the past 2 seasons. And then you have Miguel Andujar, who just missed a full year, and nobody trusts him with a glove on his hand. Where does that play out? I'm really curious to see where that goes. Do you go with recency bias because Gary Sanchez has been on the field? Or do you go with kind of the statistics where Miguel Andujar was batting 300 with 30 home runs in 2018. He was arguably the most valuable hitter and all that stuff. And Gary, quite frankly, if we're being honest, he has not been very good in the past 2 seasons. He's had his spurts of kind of what we saw in 2016 and 2017, but he hasn't been nearly that same player. So I'm curious to see where the fans are going to go with this.
But as you mentioned, I think to me, if I had to make a prediction right now, whoever comes out of that mini pod between Torres, Severino, and potentially Judge, unless Dominguez shocks Judge, which I don't see happening, because you're going to potentially have a Gleyber Torres, Aaron Judge semifinal matchup, and that's going to be if that happens, that's going to be fantastic.
I don't see. You would think Aaron Judge there because I feel like you don't find many people on Twitter kind of hating on Aaron Judge. Like this is like the bona fide captain of the team. He's the clear candidate to become the next captain of the Yankees. So does that play a role? Probably. But on the flip side, Gleyber Torres has been nothing short of sensational during his first 2 seasons. So who would I vote for? Probably Judge, only because there is not the only question in his game, in my opinion, is the strikeouts. And unless you're a traditionalist, how much do the strikeouts really matter anymore unless you're batting 190? In my opinion, if you're out, you're out. That's just the way I see it. So I would go with Judge. I'm gonna vote for Judge because defensively he is so elite that it pushes him over the top. And he's been like when he's on the field, he's been relatively kind of consistent throughout his career. Not in the sense where I know he has his periods of struggle, but he's always going to be that 270, 280 hitter with extraordinary power. I'm not saying he's consistent like throughout the year, but I'm saying throughout his career, he's been kind of the same hitter. I don't know. I'm trying to talk my way into someone kind of heavily, but every reason I give, I'm thinking for Judge, and then a reason for Gleyber pops up. So I don't know. What are you thinking?
We'll have the chance if that does happen to talk about that more next week, and we can dive into that a little more. But I think it'd be a lot of fun if that's the matchup. Even Severino Judge would be great too. I think either way, if Aaron Judge gets through, it'll be a really good semifinal. The Robin region was interesting. I was not surprised Jesus Montero lost. I was really surprised how much Clint Frazier dominated in that vote.
Recency bias.
Yeah, I guess so. Montero's not viewed very favorably amongst Yankee fans to be talked about.
Nope.
So I think it really you mentioned the bracket kind of opens up for Judge. I actually think the bracket opens up for Betances because he'll get Frazier, and then if he wins that matchup, he plays either Andujar or Sanchez. There's a path to get Dylan Betances to the final.
Yeah, Dylan is only really the most short thing left because you have the arguments against Gary and Andujar, and I'm pretty sure he's going to beat Clint Frazier here unless something crazy happens. Only because I don't even have to explain myself why Dylan would go over Clint, but if you go to the next round and you have guys with flaws there, Sanchez and Andujar, like we just discussed, those are flaws. So Betances could very easily overcome that.
Absolutely. That's the thing where I think also that you have to look at Frazier. If you're going off prospect, there is still the little bit of the unknown with Frazier and the bat speed everybody gets into a little bit. I think Betances will comfortably, but I can see why Frazier from a prospect perspective was a very high prospect that we just haven't seen enough of at the big league level. So there's still that level of intrigue there. It's kind of like with the Sanchez and Andujar matchup where it's kind of you have the unknown with Andujar still after only one full year in the bigs, but you kind of know Gary Sanchez, but he did have that rise up the system as a prospect. Again, we mentioned it last week, and there's no criteria to how you vote. It's how you want to vote, which that's what we need to change in future Prospect Madness, and that's a whole other debate. But we want to get just your take. If you've seen him as a prospect, feel free. If you want to comment even on the vote, you could do that. Maybe you could say why you voted for that player. I'd be really intrigued to see, especially as we get this far in the tournament, why you voted for that player.
Yep. Give us your reasons, man. Like, this is why we talk about it. This is all we have left to talk about, really, right now. So if you're voting, leave a comment under. Don't be afraid. Give us your reasons why. We want to discuss these points. There are many points to talk about here. So don't be shy.
So as we wrap up the show here, I think we've just from the Kiley interview alone, we have a lot that we unpacked here today, and I really enjoyed it. I know final thoughts are usually tough to come by, but you got any this week?
No, I don't. Well, I mean, unless I don't know, nothing. I guess watch All American on Netflix. Good show. If you haven't watched it, watch it. All American is a phenomenal show. It got me through 3 days of this quarantine. 3 straight whole days, man. So find a show on Netflix and binge, because that's all we got left.
Now, here's my question to that before I give a little final thought, maybe something to think about. Have you seen Tiger King?
No,
Do you plan on it? Because I haven't.
You know what's funny? My parents are kind of pushing me to watch it, even though they haven't seen the stuff, so I don't know what they're talking about. But apparently everyone's going crazy over this Tiger King show. And originally my mom was like, "Oh, have you seen the show about this Tiger show?" I'm like, "Tiger? Like they made a show about Tiger Woods on Netflix?" And to my disappointment, it was about actual freaking tigers, and there was some scandals and stuff. I don't know. Should I watch it? Are you gonna watch? If you watch it, I'll watch it, and we'll talk about it next week.
I've thought about it. I will let you know. I need something to watch, so I'll think about it.
Have you watched All American yet?
I have not. Maybe I gotta watch it.
Do it. Yeah, it's a great show. Great show. It's based on a true story, but like I don't know how true it actually is, because it feels more like a high school drama show than it would be like a true story. But yeah, watch it. All American's a great show. Tiger King, we have to discuss as a podcast if we want to watch that.
What my final thought for this week is actually something I saw before we hopped on here today to record. Great idea by Jack Flaherty, pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals. I'm not going to ask you to give an answer here because it's off the top, and that's going to be hard to do. So maybe we'll think about it. Maybe we'll talk about it next week. Flaherty tweeted 5-pitch arsenal, so you get 5 pitches. Choose from any pitcher ever. So he would take an Aroldis Chapman fastball, a Jose Fernandez slider, an Adam Wainwright curveball, a Pedro changeup, and a Rivera cutter. So you have to build your all-time pitching. Like, take 5 pitches, for example, and who you want, which pitcher to throw that pitch.
Huh? All right. So I think let me try to put something together off the top of my head. Okay. Let's go with just because we're a Yankee podcast. I'm gonna go with a Garrett Cole fastball. Okay. Because that's spin rate, all that good stuff. A Garrett Cole fastball. Mm-hmm. Throw me a Mo Cutter in there.
Yeah, you have to go Mo Cutter.
Yeah, that's 2. Give me a Kershaw curveball. I'll take the Pedro changeup, and give me a Corey Kluber slider.
Now, here's my question: you don't have to include Cutter. I would include Cutter in there, but let's say we take a different pitch out.
Oh, Cutter and slider. No, let me take Kluber slider.
Do we include though? Like, do we throw like a little Tim Wakefield, R.A. Dickey knuckleball in there? Do we start to get into a little screwball?
You would have to get
Tanaka split finger.
You would have to get very specific and choose like the 2011 or 13, whatever R.A. Dickey knuckleball. What year did you win the Cy Young? Was it 14 or like? Forget. I don't know. But if you could specify which year, then give me the 2000 whatever R.A. Dickey knuckleball in there. As opposed, you can't have a cutter and like that. That's just such a boneheaded pick by me, a cutter and a slider. So I'll keep the Mo Cutter, and I'll get back to you in the 5th next week. There's a tease for you.
Yeah, 2012 was the selling for Dickey, so it was right there.
Okay,
but it's really interesting because then you're like, obviously it's different people. But you got to throw like, what would you put for Nolan Ryan? What would you put for Randy Johnson? Like,
yeah,
there's
no,
so
this would
many
have
different
like that
pitchers.
was all that stuff was just off the top of my head. This would have
Yeah,
to be
of
something
course.
that'd be thought about, looked into, like all that fun stuff. And I think that actually can make for a good segment next week. There's a little tease for you.
There you go. And just to trust me, I watched the Nolan Wright and Dwight Gooden game. Lived up to the billing then, and lived up to the billing now. I enjoyed it. It was like a 12 inning game, and I think it went back to the days where, like, I think Ryan went 9 innings and Gooden went 10. I guess really a bullpen.
Yeah.
Bullpens existed, but guys went multiple innings then. It was refreshing to just watch a different brand of baseball.
Wild. Yeah. Wild stuff, man.
But James, where can the listeners find you on Twitter talking about your Netflix shows, when you golf, whatever? What do you got?
You can follow me on Twitter at O'Connell NY. Right now we're quarantined. Hopefully get out to the golf course soon. But yeah, that's all we got.
You can follow me on Twitter at Rickinator555. That's at RICK, letter I, Nader like in Terminator 555. Catch my show Kicking with Keeler on Full Press Radio. That is every Thursday at 8:30. We got a good show this week. I'm going to have you guys talk about the favorite sporting event you've ever been at. So kind of your favorite game you've seen in person. So I think that's going to we got a couple comments on that. It's going to make for a good show. We'll talk a little about the upcoming 2K NBA tournament, a little football. So still getting the things together. Last week we did the interview with Steve Lewender from NASCAR.com about the iRacing, which I thought was pretty cool. I watched a little bit of that this week. So definitely check those last couple episodes out. We have a couple great articles on the website, some good interviews that we did. Devontae Davis talked with Frank German and Janae Kamajian. I probably got that wrong. I'm sorry if I did. But they did an interview with Daniel Bees. Check that out. A lot of great stuff on the site. We want to recommend it. Always, you can follow us on Twitter at Pinstripe Pros. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Give your 1-star rating, 5-star rating. We want 5 stars. We want to hear from you. Always send your feedback, what you like, what you don't like, any guests you want us to have on, any segments you want us to discuss, what shows you want us to rate on Netflix. I don't know. But you can send a comment. We always
give us something to talk about.
Something. There you go. And remember, if you sign up for our Dugout membership program, you get your first 30 days free if you use the promo code IMissBaseball. So get a chance to view a month's worth of content. I'll have an article up on sort of what we talked about today with the MLB draft and how it affects the Yankees going forward. So I'll have that article up. And, of course, follow Pinstripe Prospect Madness. It's great. Final 8. Be sure to vote if you want. And remember, tell us why you voted. I think we want to make that kind of next week when we get in the Final 4. I want to read some of your reactions to why you voted. So I definitely will look forward to that. So from all of us here at Pinstripe Prospects, for James O'Connell, for Rob Pimpsner, the founder and the man behind the board, I'm Ricky Keeler saying, hope you have a great week. Stay safe, stay inside, and we'll talk to you next week, everybody.
Later.